Citizenship Amendment Act notified for implementation and widely reported across the world. So as we scan the international press, how did they report on the CAA? Let's find out. First, what is CAA? The Indian government has announced that citizenship will now also be provided to Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Parsis and Christians who have been religiously persecuted in Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are India's neighbor nations, and who arrived in India by December 31st, 2014. So how did the international media report this specific announcement? Al Jazeera led the pack, saying, India implements anti-Muslim 2019 citizenship law weeks before elections. The report begins with how the law does not include Muslims, quotes rights groups saying the law intends to target Muslims, and then goes on to have a full segment on rising Islamophobia in India. Somewhere in the middle, in passing, they do mention what CAA is really about, who may benefit from it, but not many extensive details. Now, I understand that Al Jazeera may have a target audience, but I'm sure that this Qatar-based media group also knows that those getting citizenship via CAA are at the verge of extinction as ethnic communities that have been persecuted in those respective countries, and that they are in desperate need for help. Does Al Jazeera also care to ask, for example, why Qatar supports Hamas but did not let in the Palestinians who were suffering in Gaza during the war? Why did none of the Arab nations open doors for the Palestinians during the war? And let's also be honest, Qatar is in fact the most difficult country to even get a citizenship. India, on the other side, is trying to help who it possibly can. To refresh your memory, for example, despite battling the COVID pandemic, India responded to desperate calls from the last batch of Afghan Hindus and Sikhs when everyone else ignored them. I met about 60 of them in Delhi in 2021. This video had gone viral of a few pleading inside a Gurdwara in Kabul. In those trying times, only India responded, not even Canada, where a visible population of the Sikh community lives. Decades ago, lakhs of diverse communities were known to have lived across Afghanistan, including the Buddhists, the Sikhs and the Hindus. Today, the Buddhist heritage has been destroyed. Less than 100 Sikhs are left in Afghanistan now. And I have no confirmation if there are any Hindu left at all. Yet Al Jazeera tells you only about the exclusion of one community, when in fact there are many other sections, segments and communities that have not been included in the CAA. Now let's talk about the New York Times. Very interesting. The headline, India law that sparked deadly riots enacted after 4-year delay. In the subheader it says the law is criticized as anti-Muslim, is about Modi election campaign. Soon this headline was changed, but we took screenshots. Now the header says, citizenship law that excludes Muslims takes effect, India says. And then goes on to mention about the communal riots that broke out in 2020 in the subheader. Which law was mentioned in the headline? Indian citizenship law that will now exclude Indian Muslims. That sounds huge. What is wrong with India? Oh wait, this is not about the Indian Muslim citizens. So what is the law about then? For that, you'll have to click on the report to know about who the law is for. But I suggest don't hold your breath. Not extensive details are mentioned. And it is not that NYT does not know or has not reported on religious persecution. I want to quote this solid report on the ground in the NYT in 2020. Poor and desperate, Pakistanis Hindus are accepting Islam to get by, and that many of them are facing discrimination and a virus-ravaged economy and are essentially converting to survive. The same NYT report correctly also mentions that at independence in 1947, Hindus composed about 20.5% of the population of the areas that now formed Pakistan. By 1998, the last government census that was done by religion, Hindus were left at about 1.6% only of Pakistan's population, from 20% to 1%. Remember, that's 1998. And from that, the regular abductions, forced conversions, blasphemy, mob violence has only increased. And I'm pretty sure that number could have fallen more than that. So you must understand this, that in Afghanistan, the non-Muslim minorities now stand at 0 across the country. In Pakistan, they are heading to that number with the regular persecution incidents. In Bangladesh, they are facing a similar status with the number until and unless perhaps some government will decide to rein in all of those radical and extremists. So as clear as these facts are here, remember the persecuted will not go to surrounding Islamic nations in the world, which in total are over 50 in the world presently. They will expectedly, of course, look for possibly the first shelter to a Hindu majority secular nation like India. So that is what India has done to help who they possibly can. And yet the focus on these reports are why not Muslims? So listen in now to Harish Salve. He's a senior advocate speaking to India Today of why he thinks that CAA is not discriminatory, specifically with his mention of theocratic states.
These are people who are of our own ethnicity. And the policy is that people of Indian, pre-47 Indian origin, who are now in two parts of what used to be India, which have now turned theocratic, and are therefore being subjected to inferior rights by definition, but they are not secular countries. Afghanistan is now no longer secular, Pakistan is not secular. They want to come to a secular country, the Hindus want to come back to a secular India, the Sikhs want to come back to a secular India.
Let's also remember that there are those excluded from the CAA presently like Ahmadiyas, Afghan Muslims, Rohingya Muslims. But they are still living in India. They have shelter and help in India, and for years, many have international refugee status here in the country. As I scanned through the BBC, I came across this: CAA, India to enforce migrant law that excludes Muslims. The BBC first, it is not a migrant law, it is a law for the refugees. Vast distinction if you look closely. And BBC should know better, considering the influx of migrants and refugees to the country where BBC is based. Secondly, Muslims of any nation are not excluded from seeking Indian citizenship if they so desire. That still stands valid. Anyone from any nation can apply through usual means. For example, Pakistan-born singer Adnan Sami and his family are now Indian citizens. This migrant law that you mentioned are for those who fled forced conversion, rape, extermination of their ethnic identity, which were originally their homeland. And to live on, to not be massacred, they decided to head into India. Interestingly, I found no mention of a voice that benefits from this law in this report. A voice that was desperate for a home and safety that no nation in the neighborhood could provide. The whole report focused on criticism and courts' voices that call the law discriminatory. The report adds, there is a concern that when harnessed in tandem with the proposed National Register of Citizens, the CAA would be used as a way to persecute the country's 200 million Muslims. But where is the NRC? Where is the National Register of Citizens? And how will CAA affect Indian Muslims when this is about giving citizenship? So let me add what the BBC did not add. The voice of a Pakistani Hindu dancing and celebrating who said they felt like a dead man has been given a new lease of life.
एक मरा हुआ इंसान में एक जान जैसे आ जाती है, बिल्कुल ऐसे खुशी के भावना से, बिल्कुल हम तो कोटि कोटि प्रणाम उसी जो है मोदी सरकार से जो हमारी भावना को जो देखे और समझे.
Let me also tell you about the Motua Hindus, the scheduled caste Motua community who came to India after 1971. Pakistani soldiers with the support of radical Islamist parties known to have en masse massacred and raped Hindus, which led them to flee to India, many of them from the Motua community and living in India for decades now. BBC talks about the protests in Assam and the exclusion of Rohingya Muslims, for example, and others who have not been mentioned in the CAA. They have then also added comments from the political opponents. Remember this. It's not just about religion that runs a state. Some European nations are Christian states too. But are they discriminatory based on religion and in practice? Are they inflicting horrific, systematic brutality and theocratic systems like in Pakistan that discriminate by law, by passport, that mentions a specific entry for Muslims, and now similar situation in a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. So there you have it, the answer of who really needed an option of a citizenship in India. Let's break it down for you. The Citizenship Amendment Act is not about re-evaluating the citizenship of Indian Muslims. It's about extending a helping hand to those persecuted minorities seeking refuge in India. In a Hindu-majority secular nation where all citizens are equal by law, and a nation that can see what is happening in radical Muslim-majority neighbor nations. And please note that even this citizenship by CAA is not free for all, even among those who are mentioned. Applications will have to be submitted. They will then be vetted. They will have to be cleared after valid documents have been submitted. A news report needs to mention these details, not go on a bitter diatribe for the international audience. As I conclude, can't you see that these three neighbor nations with whom India has had historical, religious, cultural connect, so to say in the same belt, today has no diversity, no visible vocal diversity, almost no freedom to practice their faith in peace. Their children are on target, their girls are on target, their homes and existence are on target. India is helping those it can. There is a political messaging in it, and there is a messaging that India will not stand and watch simply anymore. If some nation or their media has a problem, why are they not standing up to offer help to those excluded in the CAA? Why should India take all the responsibility and the burden? Thank you for watching.